Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on the place of the world you are sitting today. Welcome to a new chapter of A Coffee with Kavanah. Guys, I flew to the US and this is South Carolina. So I'm amazed because I will meet two wonderful people, siblings, and uh, is Jason Calloway and the mezzo-soprano Rachel Calloway. So you can see by the name they are brothers and sisters, so it's okay. But after all this, they are praised by the New York Times for their penetrating clarity, and by the Opera News as fearless. They grace the world most stages, like from Lincoln Center to international festival. So I would like to welcome Rachel and Jason, but they are also co-founders of Shir Ami. So we will have a wonderful, wonderful podcast today. So welcome to the show again, Rachel and Jason.
Thanks, Roberto. It's our pleasure.
Yeah, good to be here.
So well, let's start. And today we will talk about your journeys, collaborations, and like the Amernet String Quartet, where Jason is participating, and also we will talk about all the details, like finding the voice. So, Rachel and Jason, it's a question for both of you. Let's start with the beginning. And in the beginning, every artist has the first spark, the moment when sound becomes calling. Do you remember when you first realized that your voice could become your instrument? Not just because of the performing, but to express something larger than yourself. Let's start with Rachel.
Yeah, we grew up in a musical household, as you might guess, as we're both professional musicians, and so there was music around us a lot, live music, recorded music, and of many different varieties. But it was always a real sort of homey and Calloway thing when the sense struck us that we would just kind of make music together. I remember singing at the piano with my parents, and then Jason would come and add something which may or may not have contributed to the success or beauty of the music. But his presence would be known. And, we would just jam. And I think that in relation to Shir Ami, the sense that the feeling I have when I'm singing and when I'm performing and when I'm collaborating with people who inspire me, or music which inspires me, that's when I really feel my voice as both, as you kind of mentioned, a sonic instrument and how I want to communicate. So just today I said to some younger singers, what is the point of singing? And they're thinking about some really important answer. And then I said, it's just communication. That's it. So that's what we do. And that's kind of how it always was for me. And I've been really lucky with Jason and in other areas to be able to communicate with my singing for some time now.
Oh, that's a wonderful idea. And let's see what Jason can tell us about my question.
Well, I would take a different approach to the question and think back to a particular performance. And in the context of this interview, that was the very first concert we gave under this name, Shir Ami. At the time, I had recently moved back to the East Coast from California, where I had done my master's degree. I was playing in a quartet. Of course, we all know that the great composers, for the most part, left their greatest musical testaments in that medium. And to this day, I still feel lucky to be able to play that repertoire. And of course, Rachel and I both give a lot of premieres of new works. Rachel has the good fortune also to sing the operatic repertoire, which is essentially the greatest of its type, just like quartets. But I remember when we were on stage, well, I should say on the bima, in our congregation and outside of Philadelphia, Shir Ami, giving that very first concert, I remember telling the audience the story of how we were inspired to do this and explaining to them that even with access to the great composers and all the joy that we derive personally, all the pleasure that we give to our audiences, the way that we can communicate all these wider messages through art, in the end, the world will not continue or stop spinning based on any concert I give with my quartet or any opera or premiere that Rachel gives on stage. On the other hand, if we're doing well and truly Hashem's work by advocating for these composers who didn't have an opportunity, those who were taken from us during the Shoah, those whose names were taken from us after pre-Soviet Russia, maybe then we can do something that really does matter beyond our own careers, beyond feeding our families, beyond giving pleasure to a paying audience. And in fact, Rachel was here in Miami 2 weeks ago to give a concert with us. And one of the works the quartet played alone is a piece by the composer Erwin Schulhoff, the German-speaking Czech Jewish composer Erwin Schulhoff, whose music we've been playing for more than 20 years. And because we've been playing it everywhere people will allow us for more than 20 years, now his music is in the repertoire. Now there are lots of groups who play it, plenty of non-Jewish musicians who aren't motivated by that aspect of it at all. They just realize the music is terrific, and there's this other side of him, that a story that needs to be told.
Nice. I mean, it's amazing what you guys are doing, and especially when you're bringing back from people that passed away in the Shoah, and now you are remembering them with this type of shows. I mean, it's amazing. And in classical music, we often talk about technique and interpretation. But what does authenticity mean to you as an artist, but also as a storyteller? Especially with what you talk, Jason, because that's kind of a storyteller.
Rach, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, sure. Authenticity, it's, as a singer, we're dealing with text, right?
Yes.
And so that's the most, that's what makes us different from everyone else. And
it's not the only thing that makes you different.
And
you see, this is the nice thing to be with siblings. I mean, this is nice. Thank you.
So when we're, as performing this repertoire in particular, in fact, at this concert Jason just mentioned, he was like, "Oh, could we do Ailey Ailey at the end as an encore?" And I was like, "We don't need an encore." And he's like, "Oh, it's so great," And the reason that he has that excitement about it, and I share it as well, is because when you're now singing the language of our people, of our history, of our world, and that language that we know, that folks know, and it's elevated by the incredible compositions of these composers. So now suddenly we have these two really powerful elements working side by side cohesively, so that I can once again communicate the prayer or the story or whatever it might be. And that authenticity is the honesty with which we study and deliver both these words of our people and the music of these composers.
Wow.
I would take it even a little bit of a step further to suggest that whereas when we were younger, we were, I would say, both of us heavily focused on making certain that we performed as broad a repertoire as we could, so as not to pigeonhole ourselves or limit our personal exposure to different repertoire. As we're getting older, of course, there are performances we give because we're just being hired to do a job, and we'll do the very best that we can. And then there are performances where we're not exactly sure how we feel, and again, we'll do the best that we can. And then there are those works that we have done many times, and in the sense that as we're getting older, our focus is narrow a little bit, a little more focused, we could say. So that, for example, Roberto, you're asking about authenticity.
Yes.
The reason I brought up with Rachel the possibility of doing this setting of Leo Zeitland of Ailey Ailey is that the very first time we performed it as part of the opening concert of Charles Krauthammer's series at the Kennedy Center, Pro Musica Hebraica, it was the first in a group of 5 Yiddish songs, and there was a man very near the front of the audience, quite close to the stage. I remember it like it was yesterday, and if I'm not careful the way I tell it, now as Baal Teshuva, I'll cry telling the story. At the end of the first of 5 songs, the composer sets the first verse of the Shema. And this man was so struck that he leapt from his seat in the middle of the concert and shouted. And it's on the record. They left it on the recording, the live performance. It's still on their website. And boy, am I working hard to try to capture whatever it was about what we did and what we did to this person in the audience on that evening to engender a reaction like that. Obviously, you can't produce that every time, and you can't bet that it's going to happen. But if it happens, it's because we are authentic in the way that we're giving ourselves to the music we care so much about.
Nice. Let me go a little bit up to memory and heritage. And one of the most inspiring aspects of your career is Shir Ami. And we will talk about this one. Discovering or rediscovering the Jewish art music that was silenced years ago or maybe forgotten. How did this project begin, and what was the emotional impulse behind it?
Maybe I take this, Rach, yeah? I had a mentor growing up whom, unfortunately, Rachel never had the opportunity to meet. He was the longtime associate concertmaster of the Philadelphia Orchestra. We grew up in the suburbs northeast of the city. And long before I met him, there was an article above the fold on the front page of the Philadelphia Inquirer when, in his last season in the orchestra, he stayed an extra year because the orchestra was going to visit Poland on its international tour that year, a country where he had not been since being taken away as a child and sent to a series of camps. Even as a young person, I must have been 14 or 15 at the time. Of course, I was aware of the importance of the stories of survivors, but this one really hit me hard then, and even more now, of course. He was a 12-year-old boy on the way to his violin lesson with his father, and a truck showed up and picked them up and took them away. Later came back for the rest of his family, his mother and his sisters. Of course, his entire family died in one of the camps, and he was kept alive because he had his violin with him. That the capos kept him around on behalf of the Nazi officers who wanted music at their functions. And quite literally, in the middle of the night, his barracks was woken, sent into the woods to dig a ditch and stand in front of it and line up to be shot. And the man next to him was shot in the head and fell in the ditch and he was next. He had the gun to his head when the Jewish capo saw him and said, no, not that one. That's the Jewish violin boy. We need him. He was kept alive and survived the camp and the war, ended up in a German DP camp where a young American composer and conductor after the war named Leonard Bernstein was conducting benefit concerts of orchestras made up of the skeletal survivors of these camps. And he met this man, then called Chaim Arbeitman, later David Arbin in America, met him, introduced him to Ephraim Zimbalist, who was president of Curtis at the time, and arranged for him to move to Philadelphia to study. And on that tour, he took a couple days off from the orchestra to play a recital in the synagogue he'd attended as a child. I mean, I don't know how you do that when you haven't been in this place in 50 years and you don't have any family. But I was so struck by it. And then some years later, I met him and got to play with him, and he became a mentor. And then Rachel and I were both starting our careers and wondering how to find something that was a little bit more authentic to our own experience and background. And we realized that we had this special thing that wasn't really being done for the most part. We have each other. We have a couple of our close friends and colleagues, all Jews, including the violist in my quartet who played that first concert, a guy my age who, believe it or not, is a first-generation American because all four of his grandparents survived, and both his parents were born abroad, whose first language was Yiddish, a guy who's only 48 years old now. And that was the motivation for doing it. And of course, thankfully, because we have in Rachel a singer, we're not limited to purely instrumental music. We have this vast sea of songs in Hebrew and in Yiddish. There are works of Ravel and Alcan that are in French, all sorts of things that we can do together.
Wow. Let me go, Rachel. I have a question for you because this is wow. I mean, this is a wow answer. When you perform these recovered pieces, what emotions or stories surface for you?
Well, my Jason mentioned, we grew up in the suburbs of Philadelphia, and my first serious voice teacher lived about 25 minutes away from where we did. And I would go to her house, and she was about a 4'10" Hungarian woman, teeny tiny. And she had her beloved husband with her who took the dearest care of her. His name was Morton, and you would hear her calling, Morton. I can hear it in my head. Anyhow, Clara was a survivor also. And that's how she ended up here when she eventually escaped. And so it was interesting because she was this tiny, lovely little woman, but she was a very tough teacher. I've actually only had really tough teachers, now that I think about it. And she was so exacting, and so there was so much rigor, and I was quite young, especially studying voice. But the care that she took with the music and with me really touched me in a different way. And then when I went to college, my voice teacher and mentor of 25 years, her first language growing up was Yiddish, and she grew up on the Lower East Side of New York. And her first voice, this is someone who was a famed pedagogue until her death 2.5 years ago. Her first voice students were cantors when she was starting to teach after having, been a professional singer. So there's always been like a connection in surprising ways to my Judaism and my mentors. And in particular, I'm thinking about these female mentors. And so to see women of different generations and their experiences as Jews in this country. And when I'm singing this repertoire, I feel almost as if I can connect to the spirit of these two women who've gone before me and many, many, many others. That there is truly a gift to be able to make this music. And because it's not alone, but with, my brother, my dearest, oldest friends, and with it's like being buoyed by history rather than being weighed down by history.
Correct.
So there's an energy that I feel whenever I come to this repertoire that is different from all the other music that I sing. And of course, some of the songs in Yiddish by Leo Zeitlin, they use, lullabies, nursery rhymes, and to get up and sing music that most folks haven't heard performed in a concert type setting with, string instruments and professional musicians and so on. And then you see someone like mouthing the words in the audience or like nodding their head. And I just wonder, what is this person's experience? When did they hear this song? Who came before them? How did they become connected to our heritage in this way? So that's some of what I feel and think when I'm performing.
Amazing. With just now, what is your next performance? Because I need to go there. I need to see you guys because I am really surprised. So, but it's not a joke. What is your next performance?
Tucson in about a month. Tucson, Arizona.
Okay. You see, guys, everybody who's listening in the US and also traveling overseas, go to Arizona. These two nice brothers will be there, and I wish to be there. Do you see Shir Ami as preservation, as resistance? It's a renewal, or perhaps all of three of them?
It's of course all of it's all of those things because the Jewish people are all of those things. The events of the last 2 years have been a lot for all of us in the Jewish community. And if there's one thing that we have in common as a people, the thing that our enemies can't take away from us, no matter how hard they try, they don't understand the way that we handle memory. It's not a history book for us.
No.
Right? When you see a chassid crying over the destruction of the temple, it's something that other peoples don't understand at all. They have no concept over feeling inside what it meant that something 2,000 plus years ago happened to them, right? And at the same time, we're not morbid. We don't dwell in the past. We study the past. We know the past. We cherish our past, which is why, for instance, we have this concept of Yizkor that doesn't exist in other traditions, right? We do this regularly every single year. For 2,000 years, we've been doing it in exactly the same way with the same text of Tehillim. Yeah. And since we're talking about all of these aspects, and of course, we're both musicians, one of my favorite stories, another one that's hard to tell, though I tell it a lot, on Rosh Hashanah a year ago, our rabbi brought up a story in the context of a sermon about the fact that so many of us had heard the call since October 7th. He brought up a story that I had read previously, but boy, to hear it in shul is a different experience. This famous story of a couple of American rabbis from the Jewish Agency traveling in the northeast of France after the war, looking for Jewish orphans who had been left at convents by their parents. And they were turned away several times, knocking on the door by the priests, and eventually the priest let them in. And one of the rabbis said, let us just watch the children finish dinner and get ready for bed, even though the priest insisted there couldn't be any Jewish children here. Let us just wait. And sure enough, the rabbi, as the children were going to bed, the rabbi sang Shema Yisrael. And there were a few kids who sang the rest. 3-4-year-old kids who didn't know how they knew the melody. They didn't know that they were orphans. They didn't know their parents anymore, but they knew it. And as you know, that's a melody that you can sing, the same melody. The text has been the same for more than 2,000 years. You can sing this in any Jewish community, from where you live to where we live, to the mountain Jews in Central Asia, the same melody, the same text, and 100% of Jews, even if they're not observant at all, can sing the second half. And we've been doing exactly the same thing since the beginning of our tradition, and we'll be doing it for the rest of time.
You're
and that's why all of these things are one and the same. This is what a peoplehood is.
Wow. Rachel, anything you can add on this one? Because you may have another story about this one.
I think Jason put a pin in that. But, it really is, the other sort of piece of it is that in the way that the Jewish people are so many things, music is so many things, right? So I think that for a lot of people, religious people or not of any tradition, if they're really passionate about music, even as listeners, my neighbors next door are really into bluegrass, really, really, really into it. One of the things that we love about the music is that it takes us somewhere else. We all hear it differently, even though it's the same thing. It takes us in a different journey in our heart. It connects us with people we maybe would never meet before. I mean, lay people, all people. So here we have, different parts of our identity working together harmoniously, so that we can share, commemorate, remember, honor, and celebrate who we are. Most folks, if they think of celebrating, they immediately think they're going to need food and music. We figure there are lots of other Jews to take care of the food, so we're going to take care of the music.
Great. Well, let me go about music and this, changing world all around. It's a kind of a mess all around the world. We live in a time that when art is constantly, moving from here to there, to conflict, to identity, to belonging. What role do you think musicians and institutions have in times of this, misunderstanding time?
Rach, go ahead.
Because you started with this one, and you talk a lot about this idea about how music is, is especially this present time.
Right.
Music.
I got it.
You got it? Great.
So, again, it's been very interesting for me, considering a lot of these sorts of questions and in the current time, and especially in the last couple of years. And as I'm getting a little older, for the longest time, I thought that I could just be a musician and just play the music that I like, or the music that someone hires me to play, and give my best to it and divorce myself from other concerns, or keep my feelings about the world or my politics or my beliefs or any of these things separate. But of course, the irony is that the most famous cellist in the history of the cello was Pablo Casals, who insisted till his dying day that he was a man first and a musician second. And he lived that, right? I mean, at the height of his career, he stopped performing because he refused to appear in Franco's Spain. And then he refused to appear anywhere that supported Franco, which ended up being pretty much everywhere at that point. And then in the last couple of years, as so many of us have heard that call, Jewish musicians all around the world, all of us are forced to confront, can I really separate who I am as a person from the music I play, whether I only play old dead composers, long dead composers, or whether I only play living composers or some combination of these things? We are forced to confront these issues. And a big part of the reason that we're even having this conversation is that for me personally, and I know for Rachel as well, and as well as for a lot of other people, the last 2 years have forced all of us as Jews to look at ourselves and think, well, all those people who liked us before still like us. And a lot of those people who told us they liked us before, but actually behind our backs said only to each other what they now say very openly, well, now we just have to accept that this is the world we live in. We should have known it was there because it's been there before, but now that we know it is, we face that crossroads. Am I going to be a musician and a Jew, or am I going to be a Jewish musician? Am I going to be a person and a musician, or am I just going to be a person who plays music, makes music for a living? And so here we are. We have to own it and we have to live it because it's there whether we like it or not. So we can push it away, as a lot of us did, as I did for the longest time, feeling like it didn't matter, or we can embrace it and be proud about it and loud about it. And even to the extent that a couple summers ago, the first summer after October 7th, we gave a concert with the quartet at KKBE, which is the oldest synagogue in the South, in Charleston. We didn't learn until after that the woman who sponsored the program had a conversation with our friend who organized it, because the program included a work by the living Israeli composer Menachem Wiesenberg. And when she heard that there was an Israeli composer, she said to him, just make sure they also play a Palestinian composer. He did not relay that message to us because he knew full well we weren't going to do it. Then, as an encore, I had borrowed the music from the Jerusalem Quartet, which had a month before almost had a concert in Amsterdam canceled over protests. The concert went on as scheduled. They played traditional repertoire. And then as an encore, they played an arrangement by Wiesenberg of the famous Israeli song Shir Ami, which we then played as well. And this woman who sponsored the concert stood up and threatened to walk out until someone else in the audience asked us to play Hatikva, which we then did. And we did it proudly. And we have to accept that there might be consequences, but if there are consequences, then it was the will of Hashem, and we're meant to stand and answer for it. So we do.
Great. Let me go to Rachel. Do you think about performing arts can create empathy when words around the world are often failing?
I don't know that I so much feel the arts bringing empathy, but I think the arts can open pieces within us that are locked. You know, I think you can go to a concert of any repertoire, let alone repertoire as meaningful as this. I mean, every piece we play has a story, you know, of real people and not real people 300 years ago, you know. But I think that when you experience the visceral sensation of live music, and I'll say that I think especially with singers, there's a body connection when you hear a singer singing to you, especially without amplification. And I think that energy can unlock something that we may not even know is within us. And so when I think about the role that the arts play, for me, it's less about creating empathy, and it's more about exposing the wounds we covered, maybe opening the things we've pushed down inside. I think that it's inherent in humanity that we can morph and change and be aware of ourselves in those moments. And I think with music, it really, and the performing arts all, give us a space to go in a different direction, whether it's more into ourselves or out somewhere else.
You guys, I mean, I'm amazed about what the way we are talking here. Let me go to legacy and continuity. What do you tell young musicians who are trying to find not just their sound, but their voice, which is different, their identity? Who will get this question?
Well, there's another interesting historical precedent in the music that we play in this context that didn't really resonate for me until recently. These Jewish composers who were students of Rimsky-Korsakov, then later named by the authorities the Society for Jewish Folk Music. It wasn't folk music at all, but that's a separate story. They were young composers from the Pale, living in the imperial capital of St. Petersburg, students in the class of the greatest Russian composer of his time, searching for their own voices, and they all felt a little lost. I'm sure it was a difficult existence, being essentially peasant Jews in this major city that didn't want them around. And they asked Rimsky what they ought to do, and he suggested to do as he had done in drawing on his own native music, Russian folk music, as the basis for a musical language, and do the very same. So, of course, these composers, Zeitlin and Akron, Zhytomyrsky, and so many others, they based new, serious concert works with and without text on secular and liturgical Jewish sources. And I think at the end of the day, if each of us can find a way to tap into something that resonates with you personally, then the rest will follow in its time. And that need not necessarily be the music that we're talking about here. I mean, another one of my mentors was the great violinist Felix Gallimir, who was famous, most famous claim to fame was that he was one of the founders with the Sirkins of the Marlborough Music Festival, and taught at Juilliard and later at Curtis for many years. Everybody in my generation and older who's serious in this country studied with him, chamber music at least. And the music that spoke to him was the music of his time. He was born right after World War I. He made his name in Imperial, or what was left, I should say, of Imperial Vienna. The composers he knew best were Schoenberg and Sons, and Ravel, and all of them. It wasn't a stretch for him to advocate for then new music. This was the music he knew the best. It was what he lived and breathed every day of his life in Vienna in the early 1930s. And so he spent the rest of his life doing it. And to this day, if he's remembered for anything as a player, it's for the work he did with that music. So
Okay, Rachel, anything to add here? Anything you can add here?
I don't
Or
think
let
so.
me go to the other one.
Mhm.
Let's go to the other one because this is for you. Looking forward, and this is for you, huh? What projects or dreams still keep you curious? And what is your next frontier? Where are you going?
Outer space, I hope. No, I don't
Mhm.
actually.
No, 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 no.
That's too
I mean,
scary for
maybe
me.
Martians can, and they will love your team. But
Maybe.
now let's talk about here.
Mhm.
um, well, there's a couple things that are really on my mind, and Jason and I have been speaking for years about making some recordings so that some of the work that we've done can live on beyond us as a resource. We're kind of in the process of working on some big grants and things so that hopefully we can make that a reality while we're really, sort of in the prime of our career as well. So that's one thing that I really want to do. And beyond that, honestly, I would love to take this music all over the world and have the opportunity to explore what other Jewish art music might be possible, might already exist in places where I haven't thought of it yet. I think that one of the most exciting pieces we perform together is a piece based on Sephardic melodies. And so I'm especially curious just to continue to learn about, all the different languages that Jews spoke around the world. That piece I sing in Ladino, and to see these different places. There's a wonderful Instagram account I follow that's goal is to say Shema in front of every synagogue in the world. And
Huh.
so it's like, yeah, it's
Wow,
good.
that's
And
awesome.
it's awesome. And it's really amazing because, I grew up in this country, and my Jewish life has been, my whole life has been, centered here, though I've been lucky to travel quite a bit. But it would just be fascinating to me to share this music and hopefully someday have some kind of, artistic exchange with Jews from different places to learn what else is out there in our tradition that I haven't had the opportunity to experience yet.
Something to add, Jason, because I mean, and this is not in the moon, and this is here.
Mhm. Well, there's a great Wikipedia page that I poke around on from time to time with links directly to the Jewish communities of all the countries of the Caribbean and Latin America. And to that, people have over time added most of the other countries in the world. And likewise, when I click, for instance, and see there's a beautiful synagogue in Curacao.
Yes,
There's one of the few synagogues remaining in the Caribbean with sand floors is in Jamaica. Of
yes,
course, there are beautiful congregations in Chile where you are, and in Argentina, and all sorts of
yes.
places. My dream has always been to, even before becoming observant, was to take this music to these places, but especially now, just just to be able to perform in these places, and as Rachel mentioned, to hear them in a liturgy that we would recognize, but probably in a language we might not. And the music would definitely be a little different because, of course, we're both Ashkenaz. I've never even been in a service in a Sephardic congregation. In fact, I'm looking forward to doing that for the first time over this winter holiday. I'm gonna daven Shachrit at Shari Israel in New York, which is Sephardic. So I don't know what to expect. But imagine if we
Different.
could take the music that we love into these places, into these grand and very old spaces, which in most cases are much older than the majority of our spaces in this country. I have always wanted to do that.
Great, great. I mean that's the future. I know you will do it. You will do it. I mean, you will have the time to travel to go this Latin American countries or the Caribbean or other places to find other music, and it's I like it very much. Let me. Time is flying, and we have talked a lot. I mean, this has been a wonderful show. Rachel, where the audience can find you over the internet?
Absolutely. Well, you can find me on my personal website, which is my name, rachelcalloway.com. Pretty easy. And there are all kinds of performances, both on my website and on YouTube, of a variety of repertoire. So, yeah, check us out. Some of my recordings are on Spotify, all the usual places.
Very good. And Jason, about the quartet?
The same thing. We have our AmernayQuartet.com. We have our YouTube channel. We have all the usual social media and lots of recordings on Spotify. Yep, all the same stuff.
Well, Rachel and Jason, I really would like to thank you for this conversation. It's reminding us that music isn't just performance. It is memory. It's sensation. It's everything. So thank you very much for this time, and all to my people. You need to subscribe to our channel. We have a lot of followers, and next time I'm going to talk with someone from Europe. So you see, guys, it's a lot of things going on, and both of you, thank you very much for this time, and for my audience, see you in the next Coffee with Kavanah. Bye bye now.